It's an honor to be here and to listen to all of you. I have been a fan and continue to be a fan. Hi, my name is Javier Zamora, and I'm the author of Solito, a memoir told in the present tense by my 9-year-old self. I was born in 1990 in a small fishing village to two 19-year-old parents during the Salvadoran Civil War that lasted from 1980 to 1992. My dad was a devout leftist, and because of his involvement at the local fishing co-op, had to flee the country before I turned 2. My mom followed in 1995 because, as a woman, El Salvador wasn't and continues to not be the safest country. Both of them left thinking that their time in a foreign land wasn't going to last more than 2, 3, 5 years max. My grandparents, who loved me and cared for me in my parents' absence, believed my parents were going to return. I believed my parents whenever they ended our weekly phone calls with, "We will come back soon, mijo." But around 1997, that sentence changed into, "You will soon be here with us, mijo." This shift was not unique to my family. At school, I wasn't the only kid with at least one parent who had migrated to what we called La USA, the country of Baywatch, Full House, Friends, Saved by the Bell. The country us children knew was the best in the world because it had to be that good for our parents to choose it over us. And so, my parents did what any parent would do. They tried any way possible to be reunited with their one and only child. I interviewed at the US Embassy as myself and was quickly denied. Then I interviewed trying to pass off as a much lighter, much taller kid who had an American visa. It didn't work. The only reasonable thing left to do was to hire Don Dago, the same coyote that brought Mom over in 1995. He had been with her every single step of the way. She made it in less than 3 weeks, and if I can use the word, it was a relatively safe trip. So by the time I turned 9, I was counting the days before I would embark on my very own trip, an adventure like Simba in The Lion King. I had no idea what the trip was going to look like, but I knew that at the end of it were my parents' faces, the Golden Gate, the Full House house I thought my parents lived next to, the fountain in the Friends opening credits, and of course, Pamela Anderson. It's during this period of great anticipation and hope that I will finally see my parents that I begin my memoir just days before I left my fishing village of La Herradura at dawn on April 6, 1999. The trip Don Dago promised was supposed to only take 2 weeks, and I was supposed to be by his side the entire time because the lie I rehearsed to tell any Mexican authority who asked was that Don Dago was my father and I was his Mexican son who could tell you who the best Mexican presidents were. Of course, I wasn't Don Dago's only customer. Our immigrant group was comprised of 6 other Salvadorans. Patricia, a 29 or 30-year-old mom with her 12-year-old daughter Carla, Chino, who couldn't have been older than 20, Marcelo, who was probably 28, 29, Chele, who was in his mid-30s, myself, and Marta, a beautiful woman in her 30s. Grandpa decided to accompany me to the Guatemalan border town of Tecumuman because he thought we would only be there a few days. But as Don Dago put it, the situation changed. And we spent 2 weeks in Tecún. After 2 weeks, Grandpa had to leave and our group had to change course and travel to another border town, but this one on the coast. And it's here that I'll read a smaller excerpt. Ocos, Guatemala, April 27, 1999. We're in Ocos, a small fishing town. In La Herradura, I heard the ocean waves crashing against the rocks only during big storms. The estero water underneath the pier was calm, sweet, and surrounded by mangroves. Here, like in Tecún, at night, I stare at the ceiling, waiting for something to fall on my bed. A cockroach in my mouth, a spider on my eye, a scorpion at my feet. There's no mosquito net hanging on top of my bed like back home. Grandpa isn't here to talk to me before falling asleep, to go out for walks and explore the town. And because of that, I feel alone, lonely, solo, solito, solito de verdad. I chose this passage not only because it explains the book's title a bit, but also because it's a passage that occurs right before Don Dago leaves us as we step into a small fishing boat that's packed full with immigrants from all over Latin America. It's the first time I hear Portuguese, meet a Honduran, see a flock of flying fish, and it's the first time I fear for my life. After 22 cold and nauseating hours, we land on a remote Oaxacan beach and realize we must find our very own way to La USA because Don Dago ran off with Marta. We will never hear from him again. The people that remain from our original group of Salvadorans, Chino, Patricia, Carla, Chele, Marcelo, and me, I call the Six. In the 7 weeks and 2,000 miles that follow, the Six become my family. The Six become my family. I couldn't have been able to say this sentence before I turned 29. For 20 years, I learned to hide the weeks it took me to make it to La USA, because for most of those years, I was undocumented. I couldn't afford to have anyone ask questions about how I'd gotten here. For those 20 years, I pretended that none of the immigrants I met on the way to La USA existed. It was easier than facing them. Carrying this weight internally is the one true solitary task I've embarked on in my life. Was I solito when my parents left? Not really, because I had my grandparents. Solito during my trip? Nope, because I had the Six. Solito in this country? Yes, I felt like I had no one. I kept silent because I'd internalized what politicians said about immigrants. I felt shameful. And even the liberal media, books included, flattened most of our humanity, turning us into subjects without agency, subjects who only suffer. Whenever a well-meaning teacher handed me a book about immigration written by a non-immigrant, it angered me. What could this person tell me that I didn't already know? I'd lived it. I'd survived it. Perhaps this realization has been the most vital in unpacking my trauma, saying the words, I'm a survivor. It didn't happen overnight. I began the real healing work when I met my therapist on October 2019, 20 years after I successfully crossed the border on June 10th, 1999. Spoiler. But healing truly became my 24/7 job once I met my now wife, who is a Reiki practitioner and a survivor of another trauma themselves. This privilege of having professionals and loved ones supporting me is not lost on me. It's a privilege that most immigrants can't afford, but it's important I mention it here because it's through this dedication to my mental health that I could land at the realization that yes, indeed, I am a survivor. I was not alone. I owe my life to the strangers that chose to help me during those 7 weeks in which we were robbed, were hungry, cold, thirsty, and were detained by Border Patrol multiple times as we tried to cross the Sonoran Desert. And so, Solito, especially dedicated to 3 of these strangers that I consider family, even though we lost touch in 1999 and I still haven't heard from them. Chino, Patricia, and her daughter Carla. With 100% certainty, I would not be standing here today without the love and empathy that they showed me during those 7 weeks from Ocos to La USA. 7 weeks during which no one in my family knew where I was, or even if I was alive. It's also dedicated to every immigrant and person who showed us kindness when they didn't have to on our 3,000-mile trek north. My story is not the only story out there. There are hundreds, thousands of similar stories walking all around you, perhaps sitting next to you right now. We work next to you. We pick your food. We are your teachers. We are everywhere, carrying a similar, unimaginable story that's difficult to share with anyone, even ourselves. This book is for survivors, so it can show us that we can share, that we can unpack those dark times, that we are superheroes that have overcome the unimaginable. But it's also for non-survivors to realize that exact same thing, that immigrants are downright fucking badasses. The silliest notion I've encountered on tour is that there are still some Americans out there that think they don't know anyone who has gone through something similar to what I describe in Solito. Well, if you really think that, now at least you have names, personalities, and faces for a few of those people. Chino, Carla, Patricia, Marcelo, Chele, Javier. See us for the amazing, dope individuals that we are. We are more than the worst minutes and hours of our lives. We are more than what any politician has ever said about us. We are fully human. Gracias.